Hello, hello, and welcome to the From Nature to Nurture podcast. I am your host, Danielle, and we are here today with episode 31. Today's episode is one that I'm super excited to share, especially because we are in a very abundant season, so this is perfect timing. Today's episode I am sharing is an interview with Jesse Akozbek. He is a wild food educator and is obsessed and has a deep passion about sharing foraging, and wild foods with the world. This was such a fun conversation, and I left so inspired with so many ideas. So let's get to know Jesse. Jesse is a wild food educator known for his in-depth videos on his YouTube channel, Feral Foraging, with over 500 subscribers, and for creating Gather, the Foraging App. He's also obsessed with developing better methods for gathering and processing wild foods and debunking toxicity myths that wrongly vilify edible plants and mushrooms. More than anything, Jesse wants to create clear education that makes foraging approachable to all who are eager to eat wild foods in their modern world. I highly recommend getting a notebook ready because this episode is packed with so much goodness. Let's welcome Jesse. Hi, welcome, Jesse. I'm so excited that you're here to talk to us today.
Likewise, I'm very excited to be here to be talking about all things foraging.
Yeah, I had a really great time at your class that you taught at the Wild Medicine Conference. And as soon as I took that class, I knew that I was like, I have to have him on the podcast because I think in the world of herbalism, a lot of the focus is placed on the medicinal qualities of the plants and not how to work with them in like a food sense. So I'm really excited to talk about that and working with plants in our local ecosystems.
Definitely, yeah, there's so many things out there, too many to, be able to talk about here, but we'll talk about as many as we can.
Awesome. Well, if you would like to introduce yourself and tell everyone how you came on the plant path.
Yes, so my name is Jesse. I am the creator behind the foraging education page Feral Foraging. I'm also more recently the developer of Gather the Foraging app, which we might get to talk about a bit more throughout our conversation. And yes, I am not an herbalist, so I might be a little bit different from some of your other guests. I started off my foraging journey and I was doing more herbal things at that time, maybe about a decade ago or so. But at this point, my path kind of strongly took me down the lane of wild food. So most of my experience and my research over the past decade has been more focused on the wild food aspect of foraging.
Yeah, and that's not something that I have a ton of experience in. Like, obviously, most things are like edible that are also medicinal, but like they might not taste great. Um, I know for me, the first like wild food that I think I ate was wood sorrel when I was a little kid, and I didn't know what it was called until I was in my late 20s. It was sour grass to us. But I think chickweed was the plant that really like unlocked wild foods for me because it just tastes so different than what you would expect it to taste like when you just look at it from an outside perspective. So did you have a plant like that that really made the wild food click for you?
The first, really, it was the plant or the tree, I guess you could call it, that I call my gateway drug into foraging. So way back in the day, I was listening to a podcast about it was about rewilding, is what it was called. And the host would get on and he would talk about how you could eat acorns. And before this point in time, I've been like getting into survival skills and things like that. A friend of mine was doing that, and it was kind of cool, but I wasn't like running out the door to go do more survival skill stuff. But then I was hearing about this acorn thing. I was attending Auburn University at the time, which is known for its oak trees. So there's acorns everywhere. And there was some right down the street from me, and I thought, okay, I'll give it a shot. And I collected like a gallon bucket of acorns, got a bunch of weird looks from a lot of people walking by. I think it was around finals week. So they thought, okay, this guy snapped doing too much studying for finals week. So that was a fun part of it. And then I took them home and I learned about the process you have to go through in order to leach them and make them edible because they have a very large amount of tannins in them. So they would taste very bad if you didn't leach them and they wouldn't be good long term. So I go through this process and I end up making essentially like acorn brownies, effectively is what they were. And I had my first bite and I, I'm taking a bite of this bread that I made from these nuts that I picked up off the ground just a week ago, just down the street from me. And my mind was blown. And it was like in that moment, a switch was flipped on in my brain, and I had the question, well, what else is out there? And I just kept on asking that question, what else is out there? And that's what brings me here today.
Wow, I love that. I have semi started the process of working with acorns in the past. I did the gathering part, and then I was like, I don't know, this might be too much work, and I never got around to it. But it is a goal of mine one day to kind of like mill it down into a flour and you do all the things. But it's such a wild process, especially when you think about how like acorns were like a food staple for a lot of cultures, like before our like modern barley and whatever. Um, that's just wild.
Yeah, I was definitely starting on hard mode, and it was just, I didn't know what else there was. And that was right in front of me. So, yes, I have a video that I'm working on acorns that I want to publish later this year because I've honed my method over the years. And there is a way to process them that you can kind of get more bang for your buck out of it a lot more quickly for what you need, which is to focus on the starch aspect of acorns. But that'll be on a video sometime probably around October, November of this year.
Oh, I'll definitely be watching out for that because yeah, I want to try it again. I just need other projects to slow down before I can designate all my time to that. It's a lot of work because
Totally understand.
there's some like wild foods that you can just, pick up and eat, but then yeah, some need to be more processed either for like safety or for us to be able to ingest anything. So like, did you have any I don't know if I want to call them failures, mishaps like when you're first starting and trying to figure out like what's edible and do you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah, I mean, I one will come to mind, but there have been many times where you know, the big mistake that you can make when you get into this is that, you'll find a thing like, oh my gosh, this is this thing I've been, reading about it, and you gather a bunch of it and you take it home and you have absolutely no plan for what you're going to do with it. And as you said, we all have busy lives, there's a bunch of stuff going on, and then I wasn't actually able to do anything with it before it went bad. So I had to, throw it away or throw it outside, I should say. And yeah, that happens. That can happen quite often. So, a rule of mine that I have for myself is if I'm ever going to gather something, like I need a plan for what I'm going to do with it when I get home. Like I'm going to use this for X, Y, Z. Otherwise, I'll usually end up not having used it in the end.
Yeah, yeah, that's true. I know with my acorns, I just ended up tossing them back outside, and I was like, "That's fine, like no harm done," since I wasn't like harvesting from a plant. They're already dropped. Um, but yeah, of course, like if you're going to be chopping plant pieces off of the like full stalks or whatever, yeah, having a plan would be great. So we don't want to waste. That's kind of a lot of. I think that's a big part of like the wild foods too, is like waste not, want not, like taking from our environment in an ethical way versus like standard agriculture.
Right. And I'll add two things to that, which is, and I learned this from one of my favorite teachers, Sam Thayer, and he has a quote or a line which is like, "Don't worry about chicken feathers" or something like that. And it's kind of an anecdote for a story about a guy, he gets chickens and he raises them on his farm. And then, he's processing the chickens and he's like, oh, I have all these chicken feathers. I need to do something with them. And then he goes through this whole fuss about like trying to use the chicken feathers to like not waste anything and make the most out of them. And he can't, it doesn't work out. He can't find a good way to use them. So he just decides, you know what? These chickens, it's too much work. So that is to say, a natural part of foraging and working with wild plants is that there is going to be some waste in the realm of a thing that you are not going to use, and that's okay. It's not something to shy away from, it's something to embrace. And, usually it ends up in a compost pile outside, or it ends up being acorns that you leave for all the squirrels outside or whatever it might be. So it might be, quote, waste to us, but it is not wasted as far as nature is concerned.
Right, yeah, and that's the same in herbalism where I just kind of compost everything left from my tinctures or from my oxymels or whatever. Yeah, we use as much as we can and then we give whatever is else back. Um,
Definitely so.
I know that a big like part of your mission is to make foraging more accessible and approachable and less scary. Why do you think foraging intimidates a lot of people?
I think that there's a lot of moving parts to this. In North America, which is where we are, and where I teach and where I, encounter, people in terms of teaching foraging the most, just has a baseline, kind of anti-foraging feel to it and culture to it. People are, if I ever tell them what I do, it's very common that they'll say something like, oh, don't die doing that. Oh, I could never do that. I would make a tiny mistake and I would end up dying, whatever it might be. So it's not a part of our culture. I think most people growing up, myself included, haven't done any foraging of any form, that they never ate a dandelion from their yard, that they never had sour grass or nature skittles, as I sometimes call them, or anything. So even the notion of doing that is foreign to them and scary and unknown. And overwhelmingly, the greatest fear, of course, is I'm going to make a mistake. I'm going to mistake a uh, deadly or poisonous plant for an edible one, and I'm going to get hurt. And the reality is that, of course, that is a possibility. There are poisonous, dangerous plants out there, as well as mushrooms, and we need to have, respect and understanding for them. But I also tell people I think foraging is even safer than driving a car. When you're out driving a car, there's a bunch of other people on the road driving cars, and you have no control over what they're doing and how they're driving. So there's an element that you can't control every aspect of it. But when it comes to foraging, you are absolutely completely in control. You decide at the end of the day whether or not you are going to use something or consume something or eat something or not. And if you go by a few simple rules, rule number one being never eat something that you are not both 100% confident and comfortable in the identity of that thing, then you're off to a really good start. And I've never been hurt, or I've never made any mistake following those rules. The other aspect of it is because people have a, general baseline plant or mushroom blindness. You've never really looked at them in detail before. So, you have the wall of green syndrome. It just looks like a bunch of, that's a green plant and that's a green plant too. It it seems like the differences between poison hemlock and wild carrot, or between lily of the valley and ramps, or X number of other lookalike situations, would be difficult to tell, that you'd like need to be an expert or something like that. And that is not true. I don't know of any lookalike relationship between two different plants where if you know three key details, that they aren't incredibly easy to tell apart. Now, that doesn't mean that you immediately rush in and you start foraging for wild carrot first thing, especially because, the confidence is one part of it. And I said confident and comfortable. And I was confident that I could identify wild carrot far before I was comfortable with it. And it took several years of observing both wild carrot and poison hemlock throughout the course of their lifetime before I was like, okay, I for sure know that this is wild carrot, and I for sure know it is not poison hemlock. But I think that those are the big barriers to getting into foraging. On top of there's just so many things out there, and it's hard to know where to start.
Yeah, that's true. I love that analogy of the driving. Because yeah, like you have a lot more control than what you forage versus getting in a car. And I love, yeah, I've never heard someone say confident and comfortable. And I had never thought about it kind of split into two categories like that because I am confident in about five mushrooms, but I'm not quite comfortable enough yet to work with all of them, right? Because for me, plants are so much easier than mushrooms. And there's a lot of plants that I am 1,000% comfortable and confident in versus my husband has that wall of green syndrome. This is not his world at all. And I'm pointing out all these different little plants and he's like, they all look exactly the same. How do you know the difference? And I'm like, well, this one has slightly smaller leaves or this one has five petals instead of nine or whatever. Like the small little details, yeah, that can give you a lot more confidence and comfortability, I guess.
Yes. And a quick shout out to a friend of mine, Orion from Forge, Colorado. He actually introduced me to that concept of having both things, both the comfortability as well as the confidence. And the main reason why this is important, this is a real thing that I know of. I know firsthand people experiencing this, which is like you'll basically have a psychosomatic response to believing you made a mistake or believing you ingested a poisonous plant when you actually didn't. So one of them, the one that I remember the most, a friend of mine who is a mycologist, but he grew up kind of in a very academic sense of mycology, just, identifying things for the sake of, studying mushrooms and whatnot, not eating them. And the first time that he had chanterelles, and he knew for sure that he had chanterelles, but he wasn't comfortable with it. He still it wasn't something that he'd done, and he was trying it on his own. And he's like, "Well, what if somehow I made a mistake? What if it was a jack-o'-lantern? What if? What if? What if?" And it kept on rolling through his head. And of course, it wasn't. But he ended up, developing like, especially the symptoms of anxiety, which can come with nausea and things like that, which is a very common, poisoning symptom. Then you just keep on psyching yourself out when he ate chanterelles the whole time, and he was, in terms of the chemicals in his body, he was totally fine. But yes, that's definitely a thing. So never, I always tell people there's no competition. There's no competition for eating more plants than somebody else, or discovering a plant and eating it faster than another person or anything like that. So, don't worry about going quickly. Worry about, just building that confidence and that comfortability over time, whatever time that happens to be for you.
What I'm hearing is the confidence comes from more of like the scientific side of like, yes, based off of all of these sources, you have identified it, but the comfortability part is more of a confidence in yourself, in your own skills, so that you didn't mess up the research part to begin with. And that can be a big leap in itself of just like getting comfortable with your own confidence in a way.
Yes, yeah, getting comfortable with your confidence, I think is a really good way of putting it. And it's one that takes time, and it can be a different thing for anyone of what that really takes. For me, it was not just finding it at one point in time or 2 points in time, but over the course of several years through the different stages of the growth. For another person, it could be, I know a lot of people, they'll want to go out on a foraging walk with me. And if they see me eat the plant and they're like, oh, he's having it, and then they have some with me, they're like, oh, okay, I feel safe in this now. So it might be that you're with another person that you trust their abilities, and that you're doing it together. And that can be the thing that kind of, bridges you into comfortability. So it can be different for everyone.
Yeah, that's true. I know when I'm doing like wild edible plant walks, it is wild to me that people just kind of like trust what I'm saying sometimes. That I'm like, here, eat this. And they're just like, oh, okay, you know what you're talking about. But like I'm always make sure like in those classes that I'm showing them multiple examples of that plant because this one could have some weird growth pattern. This one could be partially eaten by bugs, so the leaves look like a different shape or whatever to kind of help like, yes, you are safe eating this, and here's all the different ways that you're going to know why, because all of these different plant parts are showing you that it is this plant to kind of like back up all that information. But yeah, going with someone is a really good idea. Someone that you're confident in, I guess, and comfortable with.
Yeah, they work together.
What are some of the other like biggest myths or fears around wild foods that you find yourself constantly debunking and teaching about?
That I like that question a lot. What are the biggest myths around wild food? I think one, oh, there's so many that come to mind of like just tropes, I would call them, that people just kind of believe about them. One would be that wild food is not good, that it tastes bad or bitter, or you have to like do a lot of work for it. And there is certainly, there are far more things that are edible than are good. And I tend to spend a lot of time foraging things that are both edible and good. But yeah, the kind of baseline belief that, foraging is getting stuff that is like, survival starvation food is not the case. Another one would be that like everything is poisonous. I think a lot of people believe that, oh, if I find any random plant or any random mushroom, chances are it's going to be poisonous. And the reality is, if you kind of, survey the realm of plants that you're likely to come across in temperate North America, if you were to just like randomly pick a plant or a mushroom, it would probably be like, relatively neutral. And the other thing is that poisonous does not mean deadly. The difference between poisonous slash toxic, those terms are often used interchangeably. And I try to specifically use the term dangerous. Toxic doesn't mean dangerous. Just because pokeweed is toxic doesn't mean it is dangerous. Because there's a bunch of raw chicken. Just because eating raw chicken is toxic doesn't mean that chicken is dangerous. There's a lot of examples for that. But there are plants out there that are what I would call deadly, which means I think that you could reasonably accidentally ingest an amount that would be lethal. So plants like poison hemlock or water hemlock would fall into that category. And then there's a lot of things out there that are toxic or have toxicity, where you're going to get an upset stomach from it, or you're going to feel very bad, or whatever the case might be, but you're not going to have any like permanent damage from it. And then there's the realm of plants that are like highly poisonous, what I call them, where they are definitely dangerous. You could have some type of permanent damage, but you would likely not pass away from consuming them. So there's a whole spectrum there. And again, this isn't so that you're going to go and like randomly sample plants because like, oh, it'll probably be okay. But there is a different way that we act around a plant that could be deadly compared to could be, mildly toxic. So I think just putting things in perspective is helpful for people to, again, get more comfortable about what they're dealing with. And I guess that kind of gets into as well. Uh, it's kind of popped up more with the carnivore movement thing, and a lot of people believe that plants are like baseline. There's like baseline toxic, and that we're not quote supposed to eat them. But I think there's a lot of evidence that we are supposed to eat them. Whenever, like, if you want to do the carnivore diet, that's totally fine. That's on you. But if you want to say that the carnivore diet is quote ancestral or like evolutionary or the way we're supposed to eat, that's where that isn't the case. We know that humans have been eating these plants for many thousands of years. It's always been something that we've done, whether they are wild or cultivated. So wild plants, there are many plants that we've cultivated for a specific purpose, but that doesn't mean that when they're wild that you can't eat them. Nightshade is a good example of that. People believe that, oh, nightshades are in the wild form, they're like toxic, but we only bred them to be edible. That isn't the case. There are many, many nightshade family plants that are perfectly edible. In the wild form, black nightshade is an example of those. Um, and yeah, so we don't need to breed many things. And there are many things out there that are wild that are perfectly amazing in their wild state. American lotus is one that comes to mind for me, that straight out of the wild, you don't need to do anything with it. It's just good right off the bat. Service berry is another example. One of the best fruits in the world, wild grocery store or not, they're just good. You don't need to do anything to them. We can, but you don't need to.
What is an example of a plant that would be kind of in between, where you said toxic and deadly? You said there was like a middle category, but you didn't give an example of a plant.
Oh, between toxic and deadly? Let me
Mm-hmm.
think. Something that is like moderately toxic. I mean, so honeysuckle berry would be one. That's kind of more mildly toxic. Honeysuckle berries, or probably like, buckthorn berries, Virginia creeper berries, things like that. They would all be unpleasant to eat. You would know with Virginia creeper berries if you tried them because you'll get an immediate, like, very sharp, acrid, stinging reaction in your mouth. And
Oh.
that's another thing that can happen. And this is not the case all the time. Many poisonous plants will tell you right away that, hey, you probably don't want to eat me. That is not always the case, though. People shouldn't rely on that, especially it's not the case for mushrooms. a lot of the accounts that we have of people eating deadly mushrooms, they said that they tasted great, like from the grocery store. But yeah, th those are all examples of kind of like in between, if you ate some honeysuckle berries, they wouldn't taste good, and probably like maybe you'd have an upset stomach, or maybe you wouldn't. Maybe they would have just tasted bad.
Yeah, that's something that I've noticed with like the like toxic plants is that they do tend to like stop you from taking more. Either from like the really intense taste or like you start feeling strange, like nauseous or like a little dizzy or whatever, like pretty quickly. And a lot of them tend to have like purgative effects so that your body's trying to reject them right off the bat, which is really interesting. But I do think that there's a lot of wild plants that do just taste good out of the ground. I agree with you. I think shiso for me is one of those that or perilla, one of those that I'm just like, I want to grab just jars and handfuls of because I want to taste it all the time if you like the licoricey type taste, which not everyone does. Um, what are some of the wild edibles that you like to work with or that you get like cravings for, like some of your favorites that you're going back to all the time?
That yeah, these are the ones that I look forward to every year, and that I'm going to like no matter what's happening, no matter how busy I am, I'm going to be out gathering these. So for me, let me kind of go through the seasons. In the springtime, pokeweed is definitely one that comes to mind right away. Pokeweed shoots. I actually don't like the leaves very much, and I basically never eat the leaves, but I really, really love having cooked pokeweed stems. There is nuance to that plant. I have a video about it that'll tell you everything that you want to know about those. They need to be cooked, uh, often not to the degree that people say they need to, but they should be cooked in some form. And the peeled stems is my favorite part of those because they're tender and delicious and one of the best things ever. And then right now, this time of the year would be serviceberry. Uh, it's pretty variable. I'm in North Alabama. As far as south I am, the season's pretty variable for them. I think the further north that you get, it gets to be much more consistent, and there's much more of them further north. So serviceberries are amazing. And then getting into the summertime, you would have blueberries and blackberries and that kind of like high summer fruit season. And then in the fall, now we're getting into, I'm always foraging for elderberries, one of my favorite and one of the most abundant wild fruits in North America. And then what's after elderberry? Then we'll have persimmon. I call them feral chestnuts. Like there's a bunch of chestnuts that just grow feral that were planted a long time ago around my neighborhood and things like that. Black walnut and American lotus for sure.
Persimmon is one of my favorite too. I have a persimmon tree that's growing just right off my property and like hanging over my property. And one of my dachshunds every fall, he loves them. He knows when persimmon season is coming. He'll run right out to the tree and just like wait for them to start falling, and then he's always just like gorging himself on them. I've never had a service berry though. I was just looking at it up in your app, which we'll talk about in a minute. Um, because I know they grow here. I've just never really seen them in person.
As far south as we are, which is the Tennessee, Alabama area, the more likely area that you would find them is where they're planted in landscaping. I don't find too many just in a completely wild setting, and the ones that they plant in landscaping are total like one that's near me at a grocery store is one of the most delicious service berries of the ones that I've had. I don't know if it's a cultivar that's accidentally delicious, but yeah, they're incredible. The flavor is to me like a cross between blueberry and almond. And it's sweet and they're juicy and delicious. Like they're incredible.
I feel like I've seen it pop up like when I was like taking a hike and like using iNaturalist to identify things. I swear it popped up at one point, so now I have to remember where I was and go find it because I think there's one wild out here somewhere. Maybe one of the
The easy
landscaping
time to
ones had a
find them,
baby.
yeah, the easy time to find them, and this is where we can talk about my app a little bit, is actually when they're flowering because they flower early on in the season. So that you're kind of dealing with a more wintry landscape. Things are more brown overall, and their flowers are vibrant white. So they're pretty easy to spot against everything else. When they're fruiting, the berries are kind of dark purple, and if you know what you're looking for, you can spot them, but it's still a lot more difficult than vibrant white against like a darker brown landscape. So in my app, um, we kind of like account for this, and for every fruit that you can find more easily in the flowering time, we have a quote flower scouting window available. So we'll show you, hey, like the flowers are blooming right now for this plant. Now is a good time to go find them. And then if you have a notification for it, we'll say, hey, now they're fruiting, so get ready to be out there harvesting them. Because unfortunately, the weather is like terrible for them this year. I hate when it rains a bunch in late May in North Alabama because the mulberries and plums and Salisbury all don't like there to be a lot of rain. The rain knocks them down. They get moldy very easily. So we've had like 2 weeks of rain here, and I've missed practically everything. But I got, one of my Salisbury spots produced. So I got a little bit.
Yeah, it's been raining for like 2 weeks straight here too, and I was getting ready to harvest a bunch of roses, and now they are all gone because all the little petals got knocked down, and now they're all brown and shriveled and gross. Yeah, let's talk about your app because it's very different. And one thing that I didn't realize, until recently was that it's not a plant identification app. It doesn't have that feature in there. But then I went to like the FAQ on the website and saw why, and I was like, this is fascinating and makes so much sense. So tell us about your app and kind of what led you to create this digital foraging journal.
Yes, so I'll talk about what my app does do first, and then I'll talk about some things that people often expect for it to do and why we don't have that in there. So the app is called Gather the Foraging app, and I feel like the best way to describe it is the app made for foragers by foragers. And the main purpose of it is you open up the app, and then it'll ask you for your location, and you'll put that in, and then it will generate for you a dynamic, tailored field guide based on your specific area. So if you are in Northern California or Southern California or Central Texas or New England or Tennessee or the Midwest, you will be seeing completely, or not completely, but you'll be seeing many different things from each other because it'll show you what you can find in your specific area as well as when you can find it for your area. For instance, I was just traveling to Southern Ontario for a foraging trip, and talking about serviceberry, in Southern Ontario, the serviceberry were flowering at the exact same time that they were fruiting in Alabama. So we would show you, you would see a different fruiting window for those depending on where you are. If you're further north, it'll be delayed. If you're further south, for the most part, it'll be earlier. And then some mushrooms are kind of flipped. They'll be earlier in the north and later in the south. And that is the main part of what the app does. On top of that, for every species, we'll give you all the information that you'll want to know for how to find it, for how to gather it and process it, if there's any cautions or nuances that you should know about with things like pokeweed that we mentioned. And we have very in-depth look-alike guides for all of them. It's one of my favorite features of the app. So if you were looking at wild carrot, for instance, it would have a list of lookalikes that you should know about. And for those lookalikes, it'll show you the photos side by side of each what we call distinguishing details for the plant. And that's a very important thing. That was a very important thing for me to put in there because if you were to look up, how to distinguish poison ivy or poison hemlock, you could get a laundry list of things, but as a beginner, it's hard to know which are the most important and which are the most clear. So we're kind of filtering everything out. So we're only showing you the most clear, the most distinguishing details, and you get to see them side by side, and you can like zoom in to like compare them and everything. And then you really get to see, I think, beyond actually getting to see them in person, which is the best thing. Beyond that, it's the most helpful way to be like, oh wow, yeah, the poison hemlock stem really is completely hairless. It's splotchy. There's like a dusty coating on it. And the wild carrot one it's really hairy and there's no splotches and so on. So those are the main things that the app does.
Yeah, the lookalike part I think was my favorite because I actually used it while teaching a class, specifically around poke and elder because a lot of people misidentify them as each other. And I was in an area where I knew they were both on the trail that we were going to do, but they were like half a mile apart. And so I didn't want to be like, hey, you remember that brand new plant that you just experienced half a mile back? Do you remember what it looked like? See how this one looks different? That wasn't going to make sense to them. And so I was able just to pull it up in the app and be like, let me show you all the details of how they are different. Look at the leaves, the leaf formations, look at the flowers, look at the stems, like all the different parts. And I loved how in the app it goes into like zooming into those areas instead of just looking at broad overview pictures like you would normally just find online when you're trying to figure out comparisons between the two. So that was super helpful.
Yeah, the pokeberry versus elderberry thing is an interesting one because the plants are both completely different in practically every way except one, which is that if you were to look at two berries, individual berries of them, they would look relatively similar. And if you're getting into foraging, one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you is to zoom out. And I compare it to if you're trying to compare poke and elderberry based on the berry, that would be like trying to distinguish a Honda and a Toyota based on the car handle only. The car handle might look pretty similar, and maybe even the rest of the car looks similar, but if you look at, there's a logo on the front there, and that'll tell you right away. But with poke and elderberry, it's even easier. It's like comparing a Honda to a Jeep. So when you get into the broader details, then basically in every circumstance, distinguishing them is going to become incredibly much easier than just focusing on one part. But of course, the berry is the part that we're looking for, so that's kind of where our brain draws our eyes to. So yeah, focusing on zooming out will help people if they're trying to work on how to get a better understanding of the differences that they're seeing in these plants.
Yeah, because there's so much fear around eating the wrong thing and accidentally poisoning yourself. And I think one of my favorite um, reasons that like people should get into foraging is just like learning to look at the details of the world around you instead of just like, oh, there's a wall of trees. Because yeah, they are so different. I have never understood why people confuse poke and elder. They've never looked anything the same to me. The berries are actually different sizes. If you slightly smush them, they're very different colors. Like it never made a lot of sense to me. But learning how to look at those like small bits and pieces of the plant and comparing them, it's just a really cool skill set as well of like just noticing the details going on all around you.
Yeah, another thing that I would kind of caution people against if they're maybe they've been in herbalism for a while and they're now just getting more into foraging is to avoid what I call wishful IDing. So early on in foraging, you might be reading a bunch about elderberry, or you're reading about persimmon or whatever. Those are bad examples because they're relatively distinctive. But you'll be reading about, especially with herbaceous plants, and you really want to find them. And so you'll be out looking, you're like, oh, that's got to be it. That's got to be it. And anytime that you really desperately want a plant to be a certain one, you need to kind of check yourself and your motivations there because I've done this myself and I look back on mistakes that I made identifying two things and like how did I even think that one could be the other? And a big part of it was just really wanting to find whatever the thing might have been. So always be checking yourself of like, am I wishful IDing when I'm out here looking at these plants?
I have done that once with beautyberry. I was doing a race. I was doing a Tough Mudder race, and I was running along, and all of a sudden I see these beautiful berries off to the sides, and I was like, "Oh my gosh, I think it's beautyberry!" And I did the stupid thing of just like grabbing things without stopping and thinking about it, and ate them, and then went on with my race. Thankfully, all that I had was like some mild, like very mild nausea, and I still don't know what it is that I ate because I don't think a lot of things look like beautyberry, but this was something else for sure. Now that I think back on it, um, because that was a plant at the time that I was really wanting to work with and find, and so it's kind of like in the back of my mind all the time of like keep an eye out for beautyberry. Absolutely not.
I think it could have been coralberry is a possibility. which we actually have a lookalike relationship for in the app for Beautyberry. So yeah, now people can check that one out. But yeah, I can totally see how if it was that one that you would mistake the two if you were really looking for elderberry. I would the first time that I saw coralberry, I thought to myself, huh, this is a very weird looking beautyberry. Like, is this a species of Calocarpa, which is the genus for beautyberry?
Yep, it absolutely was. I just looked it up in the app. That is exactly
Okay, very
right.
cool.
Yeah, I
And
have
I
some
think
growing
that
in
one
my
probably
backyard too.
falls into the realm of mildly toxic, if I had to guess. I don't think that there's anything like particularly concerning with it.
Yeah, yeah. It just says inedible, not particularly toxic, but the berries are not palatable and contain a degree of saponins. So yeah, nothing like crazy happened, but yeah, I mean, it was a good lesson because this was just, this was just a few years ago. So I was already a decade in and I'm still just being dumb and grabbing random things on runs.
Yeah. Well, I tell people like it's kind of like using a chainsaw. It when I first started using a chainsaw, I took every precaution you could think of. I'm like, I'm not gonna get hurt, doing this. And then you use the chainsaw a bunch, and then, when you're kind of like, maybe an intermediate using a chainsaw, then you're like, I don't need all these precautions. Like, let's just, cut down these trees or whatever it is. And that's when you're most likely to get hurt. Not when you're a beginner taking all the precautions. So I've done the same thing. I've been like, oh, that might be this thing. And anytime that I break my own rule that I set is where, I'm setting myself up for danger. So as long as you're following the rule, then you'll be fine.
Yeah, overconfidence. Do as I say, not what I do. So getting back to the app a little bit, so why did you decide not to put a like plant identification feature in it?
Yes, so there's a couple reasons for it. The probably the biggest one is I felt like it went against the purpose of the app. So the way that I kind of think of a plant identification app is you go out, you find a plant, you take a picture of it, you ask the plant ID app, what is this? So you're asking, what is this and what can I use it for? Can I use it for something? And the app kind of approaches things from a different direction, which is, hey, here are all the things you should find, and here's what you can use them for. Go find them. So that was the main motivation. On top of, I felt like there's a lot of really great plant ID apps out there already. The one that I recommend to people is iNaturalist. And I didn't want to invest a lot of time into reinventing the wheel. I'm not going to do a better job than iNaturalist. Like they've invested a ton of time and research into their model for recognizing photos. So why try to, reinvent a thing that's already been made and that's already doing a really good job? I would love for there to be like an API to a tool like that I could use so that you could use that tool within mine, and if everyone becomes available, we would implement it. But I don't think that it still would kind of not be in the spirit of the app, which is to show you what you can find around you and to give you the tools for identifying yourself. So giving you a ton of different pictures from different angles at different stages of the growth for identifying them, and the lookalikes guide and descriptions of the characteristics for them.
Yeah, I agree. At first I was kind of disappointed that there wasn't the plant identification part in it, but then when I really thought about it, I do like how it's making you do the work because then you're also going to remember it a lot better. And that goes back to like that confidence and comfortability is that you have to go through all of those steps. I feel like you gain a lot more nuance in foraging when you go through all those steps to identify all the different parts of the plant to make it stick. I use iNaturalist mostly just for like logging pictures of like these are things I found and then I come back and I double check everything in like one of my field guides or I'll carry Newcomb's Wildflower Guide is what I carry a lot with me. It's actually covered in pokeberry juice right now, just because, classes and stuff. But because it makes you go through all of those steps to like really look at all the little parts of the plant to get to know it. And then I'm going to remember it because I just took half an hour trying to identify this plant versus just a quick little snap.
Yeah, I remember there was a point in time, it was around, I think like 2018 or 2019 is when I finally like caved. But for the first several years of me learning plants, I was like, I'm not using those apps. And like, for reference, this was at a time where, I mean, this is like way before ChatGPT. So like, it wasn't really a big, like, quote, AI tools wasn't really a big thing then. Then I guess people would have just called it image recognition. We wouldn't have even called it AI, really. And I didn't use them for a while, and so like I worked for the identifications that I got for my plants, but eventually I finally did cave and I started using it. And because I had built up my fundamental skills in just plant identification the way any naturalist would have for the past hundreds or thousands of years, when I used the app and it was suggesting, I always tell people it doesn't tell you what a thing is, it suggests what it could be. I would go through these suggestions and I would know if I took a picture of, let's say, um, passion vine, or yeah, passion vine, and it said, oh, it could be passion vine or ragweed, then I would be able to look and say, well, mine has alternating leaves and ragweed has opposite leaves, so I know that it can't be ragweed. So, I'm more confident that it is passion vine and scenarios like that. So just knowing what those details are to be able to take the suggestions and then make your own identification from them was a really good thing. I'm glad that I took that time, but I also tell people like don't not use the plant ID apps because they are quite helpful. Just don't rely on them completely, and never let it be the authority that you go by for the identity of a plant. That should always come from yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. I always teach my students to at least check 2 to 3 sources when you're trying to identify something. So don't use just an app or just a book or just a blog or something because everything's fallible. And that helps just build that confidence that you have everything right by checking multiple sources. As you were just talking about, you were going and honing all of these skills to be able to identify plants and really build that confidence in your foraging practices. What are some of these overlooked skills that someone could start to work on to implement to be able to know the plants better?
Within the realm of plant ID specifically, or in the broader context of foraging?
Broader context of foraging.
So we talked a lot about plant identification, and that would be one of them. And I think what a lot of people will find is that it is not as difficult as you might imagine, before getting into it. And there was a time where I was like completely overwhelmed by like, oh my gosh, all these plants, and I felt like I needed to learn all of them that first season that I started caring about plants. But you'll think that you don't know any of them, and then 3, 5, 8 years go by, and all of a sudden you know practically all of them, and it'll just don't worry about it and let that kind of occur. Then beyond that, in terms of foraging, I think so. Food, that there's two that come to mind. Food processing is like a lost skill. Like when you're getting into especially dealing with large amounts of a staple food like acorns or hickory or chestnut or whatever it might be, processing food is something that we don't really think about in the modern world anymore. You go to the grocery store and you're either getting foods that need very little processing, which are in the produce section, or you are buying something that's already been processed. Like whenever I would teach about acorns, people would say, "Wow, that's like so much work that, isn't worth my time, or that's not worth the effort." And it is a lot of work, but wheat is a lot of work. It's a tremendous amount of work. It's just that machines did every part of the process for you, and you just show up at the grocery store and buy the finished product. So a lot of these things are work, but especially when it comes to staple foods, it's typically kind of like there's a large amount of investment for a very, very large reward at the end of it. And I'll just pick one of my favorite skills that is one of the most fun things in the world that is not really known about anymore, which is winnowing. So winnowing is where you are using wind or airflow in order to have the term is to quote separate the wheat from the chaff. That's winnowing. And the way that happens is because the part that you want is going to be much heavier than the part that you don't want. So I have lost count of the ways that I can use this for. I'll use it with hackberries for getting rid of like bits of leaves and debris and stuff when I'm collecting them. I use it for elderberry to very efficiently filter out the stems from the berries if I'm making something like elderberry pie. We can talk about elderberry pie a little bit if you want to after. And what are some other examples with that? I use it for acorns for separating the nut meat from the shells. I will never run out of examples of where that's a useful thing, and it's fun. Like you're taking like a 5 gallon bucket or whatever of like everything mixed together, and then you're pouring it over another one pat like in front of a fan, and to see all the stuff that you don't want just fly off. And then having the satisfying like pitter patter of the stuff you do want falling into the bucket below, it's just fun. It's one of my favorite things to do. So that is a lost skill, in the realm of food processing that I think is a really, really important thing for people to know how to do.
Just like a regular fan?
Yeah, I use a box fan to do. I mean, if you have a
Wow.
windy day, you don't even need a fan, but a fan just makes it easier and more consistent to work with.
I was just imagining you standing there with a leaf blower. I didn't even think about a regular fan.
There were some times where like I was having difficulty getting winnowing to work when it was like never going to work, and I tried to use leaf blower, and yeah, it still didn't work. So yeah, just like a light airflow is generally all that you need.
Wow, that's so cool. I've never even heard of that before.
Yeah. It's for saving seed, it's something that humans have done for thousands of years. Winnowing was one of the most important techniques, and I just, imagine these people that were doing that activity for their life, for their livelihood of themselves and their families. And when I am working with something new and I'm like not doing a good job, like I'm either losing a bunch of the good stuff or I'm not filtering them quickly, like I just imagine, if I had done this for, a lifetime or for decades, like how good would I be at, that skill set? And it's motivating and exciting.
Yeah, that's definitely something that's not really done anymore. Because, yeah, that's wild. Oh, cool. Well, we have to try that. Elderberry pie actually leads to exactly to where I wanted to go next. I wanted to ask if you had any favorite recipes with wild foods that you wanted to share.
Elderberry pie is a great one that we can start with. It is common in Europe. It is not common in America because people believe that the seeds of elderberry are toxic and that you need to filter them out, which is not true. Not only do so like this gets into a larger conversation about the danger of elderberry as relates to cyanide. And the spark notes that I'll give for that is it is not relevant. The content of cyanide and elderberry is just completely not relevant to the safety of the plant. They should be cooked. There are other reasons for why they should be cooked, and cyanide is not one of them. And beyond that, I'm making a video about this later on in the year too. I'm really excited about it. That one will probably be coming out around August, so maybe shortly after people hear this episode. Basically, the cyanide content is not something to be concerned about. And even if it were in the seeds, it is not the highest content. Many people will tell you it's the highest content, and it isn't. Like the rest of the fruit has more cyanide than the seeds do, which is a shame because if people have ever had like raspberry jam, like the where they have the seed in there too, and it's kind of like a little bit of like crunch, some texture, and it's like one of my favorite parts of raspberry jam. Same thing with elderberry pie. Like the seeds aren't like super hard. They're just kind of like a little bit crunchy and they add texture to the pie. And it's one of my favorite things in the entire world. So elderberry pie is definitely one. And then I'll think of some other ones that are more accessible to people. Like I want to talk about American lotus bread, but that's not the easiest thing. Collecting American lotus and then processing it is not the easiest thing for anyone to just do. So I'll save that for the future. But then the other one that comes to mind that's just really, really amazing would be persimmon pudding. So
Oh,
one of the best things with persimmon, it it doesn't cook well if you're trying to make like jam. If you're trying to make like a cooked jam, anytime that I've tried to do that, it didn't work out. It turned it into being mealy and it just didn't work out. But for whatever reason, despite that not working, whenever you bake with persimmon, it works incredibly. Like anytime that you might use something like pumpkin puree or squash in baking, you can often substitute in persimmon and it'll work even better, in my opinion. And so persimmon pudding is not a American pudding like you get from the grocery store, like the chocolate things. That's not what that is at all. It's more of like a very kind of liquidy baked bread is what's more like. And it's delicious. We'll put in black walnut to make a, more native version of a kind of like a um, pumpkin muffin type thing. And yeah, another one of my favorite things that I look forward to eating every single year.
Ooh, I just eat the persimmons just off the tree, or I will make like an oxymel or something out of them. I haven't done any cooking with them. I'll have to try that this year. That sounds good.
Yeah. And what we do is we'll process the pulp and then we'll freeze the pulp and then we'll freeze them in amounts so we can like take it out to make a batch of persimmon pudding. And yeah, it's incredible.
Do you
Like
spin the seeds?
no, the seeds would be processed out by pulping them. And the pulp basically like when they're fully ripe it like disintegrates.
Yeah,
So it kind of turns itself into jam without you having to do much.
yeah. Ooh, I didn't think about freezing them because yeah, they go bad so fast. Okay, I have so many ideas now. Cool. Any other recipes you wanted to share?
What would be some other
Those are
more
both fall recipes. So what's a good
yeah,
like summer food?
summer food?
Hmm.
Um It would probably like high summer is really all about fruit. So it would be what one thing that before we recorded this, I was thinking through that I want to make. I guess this would fall under the realm of a recipe. Would be a elderflower quote champagne. It's not technically champagne for any wine connoisseurs out there. Elderflower is sparkling wine, and that is where elderflower is one of the main flavoring ingredients for making a sparkling fizzy drink where you can either ferment it or you can just kind of do a cordial style if you don't want it to be alcoholic, where you just let it start fermenting at the very beginning, but then you immediately filter it out after that. And yeah, you would use elderflower for the flavoring along with lemon, and then you're adding sugar. And depending on what you're trying to do, you can add yeast or not, or you can leave it and it typically will naturally ferment a bit because there's natural yeast on elderflower. And yeah, that for a summer drink, usually around here, it's around the end of May that elderberry starts flowering. So around 4th of July is when it'll be ready. So it's kind of like the perfect thing to have for 4th of July, the drink.
Oh, that's fun. I actually just made a wild soda for the first time like 3 days ago. Not with elderflower. That's actually going to be the next one that I make. But yeah, just like putting the sugar in the plants and the water in the jar for 3 days, popping it a few times every day so it doesn't explode. And then yeah, you have like a little, it's like it's fizzy, it's amazing. I just went to a mocktails class and she had elderflower in the one that she served us, and it was so good. So good.
Yeah, some people love elderflower. I love elderflower. Some people don't, I've heard. I don't understand them. And the other cool thing about elderflower in relation to other things we've been talking about with foraging is that elderflower is another great example. Very, very easy to find them when they're flowering, a lot more difficult to find them later on in the year when they're fruiting. And I was just reading a study that a lot of the time you can remove around 50% of the flowers and it won't impact the fruiting down the line. So, from any given tree, you can remove some of the flowers and you aren't taking away some of the fruit later on in the year. Because both of them, the thing about elderberry that's incredible is that both the flowers and the fruit are amazing. So you're always kind of like weighing both of them.
Right, yeah, that's why I planted 5 different elders so I could choose these ones will be for flowers and these ones will be for berries, and the deer ate all of them, so I don't get any of them anyways, but I tried. Okay, so as we start finishing up here, what is one thing that you wish more people understood about wild foods and our relationship to the landscape around us?
I think the biggest thing would be that it is not as difficult or as daunting as it may seem. And even if it's as little as trying dandelion or wood sorrel or chickweed in your backyard, any amount of foraging is better than no foraging. And whatever the gateway plant might be for you that gets you into the door with foraging, I want you to find what that thing is and to just get started. Just start finding about what is around you. And the other big thing would be it doesn't need to be somewhere else. It doesn't need to be on a trip to the Pacific Northwest or to Colorado or to some other place. Anywhere that you find yourself, there's foraging to be done around where you are. So just find out what that is.
And use the Gather app to find what's right around you on your
And
travels.
and I will say that I did make Gather my foraging app for this exact kind of purpose in mind. I the idea for it is I teach a lot of foraging, and the most common question that I get is, how do I get started? And I've always wanted to be able to give someone, be like, where are you from? Well, let me give you a tailored foraging guide for your area. I'll give you a field guide just for you. And, I'd be writing literally thousands of books if I were going to try to do that. So then I thought, you know what? I was a software engineer before I was teaching foraging. Why don't I put that to use? And that's kind of where the idea was born for the app. So yeah, for that exact thing of where do I get started, the app was kind of made in mind of that question that you might have.
Well, thank you so much, Jesse. I have so much inspiration of like so many ideas of what I want to go make now and find in my area. This was awesome.
I'm glad to hear that.
If you can just share where everyone can find you and your work, that would be great.
You can find me on my account, which is Feral Foraging, on any of the social media pages that you find. It'll be the same: YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. For my app, you can either just search for Gather Foraging on your app store, whether you're using an iPhone or an Android, or I think in the show notes we'll also have a link that you can use to download it. And if you use that link, then you actually get a free month-long trial to try out the app, as opposed to if you use it directly with the App Store, then that would just be 2 weeks. So definitely make use of that free month because there's a lot of things out there to discover.
And that was my conversation with Jesse. I learned so much and I came away so inspired. I've been having a really fun time making different herbal fermentations, and I'm really looking forward to trying some different recipes like the persimmon pudding. Oh, I love persimmon, and I might try elderberry pie this year. We'll see. But definitely check out his work. He is so knowledgeable and has a huge backlog of information, so you could really find a lot of information there. And check out his app. I've been really enjoying it, especially as we're in a very abundant season, to see like what should be popping up around me and to help meet some new plant friends, keep an eye out for some of my old loves. So I highly encourage you get outside, make some new recipes, and explore the wild edibles in your area. If you would like to find out more about my upcoming classes and offerings, you can find me at rootandwandercollective.com. I'll see you along the plant path.